Chapter 62, Hide and Seek. As they stepped out of the familiar, winding corridors of the labyrinth and into the vast openness of the gray desert, Sunny felt a strange sense of unease. Somewhere along the way, while navigating the twisted madness of the Crimson Maze, he had developed a subtle form of agoraphobia. He had become accustomed to the towering walls of coral surrounding him on all sides, the maze's endless, entangled paths stretching in every direction. As deadly as the labyrinth was, it had offered a twisted sense of security, especially for Sunny, who held a distinct edge thanks to his elusive Shadow Scout, allowing him to see beyond the turns and corners that others couldn't. But now, with only barren sand beneath and no obstructions in sight, that advantage had slipped from his grasp. The inability to hide or stay out of sight made him feel exposed. Relax. There's nothing here. That thought was supposed to reassure him, but it had the opposite effect. The wasteland was eerily empty, not a single nightmare creature in sight, which begged the unsettling question, why? What made even the horrors of the labyrinth avoid this place? Nephice led the way, Sunny trailing just behind. Their echo followed at a slow pace in the rear. Sunny glanced around, hesitating, and muttered under his breath, I have a bad feeling about this. Nephice glanced over her shoulder with her usual calm expression. Without turning again, she said curtly, Stay sharp. They pressed on in silence, the fine gray sand whispering beneath their feet. Minutes passed before Nephice raised her hand, motioning them to stop. She turned to Sunny and asked, Has your shadow picked up anything? He shook his head. Not really. There are a few odd spots, like bumps or shallow dips, but nothing moving. The place just seems dead and flat. He looked at Cassie and asked cautiously, Do you hear anything? Sometimes, her extraordinary hearing outperformed his shadow's sensing, like when they had been caught in that violent storm. Cassie had felt something wrong long before anyone else had noticed. But this time, she simply shook her head. No sounds, no movement. Nephice lowered her head, thoughtful. Then she glanced at the distant hill they were heading toward, the Ashen Barrow. We continue. She adjusted their path slightly, heading toward one of the strange knolls Sunny had mentioned. By the time they reached it, the sun was at its peak. Their shadows had shrunk beneath them, becoming dark, fuzzy blots. Sunny's own shadow had returned and curled under his feet, blending with the sand in shapeless gloom. Noon was its least favorite time. Nephice called forth her blade and slowly moved closer to the knoll, inspecting it. There was nothing extraordinary about the mound except the fact that it stood out in an otherwise flat wasteland. About Sunny's height, oval-shaped, covered in gray dust like the rest of the terrain. Harmless, probably. Still, best to be cautious, it might hold some clue. Just as she reached out to touch the mound, Sunny's shadow picked up something, a distant movement, from the direction of the labyrinth. Acting on pure instinct, Sunny spun toward the echo and hissed to Nephice, Hide! Simultaneously, he dismissed the bulky beast Cassie was riding. She gasped as she lost balance, but before she could fall, Sunny scooped her up in a Princess Carry and dove behind the mound, landing beside Nephice. Changing Star reached out to steady Cassie and shot Sunny a sharp look, her eyes asking a silent question. Trouble. He held up a flat palm, signaling her to wait. His shadow had already slid out from behind the mound to observe what had appeared. Back in the direction of the labyrinth, the coral walls stood lifeless, until one suddenly collapsed in a roar of dust and gray sand. A hulking shape burst through. 8 legs, razor-sharp bone sides, a black and red carapace, stained like armor bathed in blood. Another centurion. Sunny cursed inwardly. They had fought creatures like this before, twice, but both times they had the upper hand thanks to clever planning and carefully chosen battlegrounds. Facing one out in the open, a whole different story. Leaning toward Nephice, Sunny whispered, One of those armored nightmares just stepped out of the maze. She frowned. Cassie lightly tapped Sunny's hand and asked, Which way is it going? He refocused on his shadow's vision, then exhaled with relief. Heading for the barrow. If we stay still and don't draw attention, we might avoid it. Nephi's thought briefly and nodded. Watch it closely. Tell me the second something changes. The three of them huddled tighter behind the mound, staying as quiet and small as possible. It was a tight squeeze, bodies pressed together in the cramped space. Sunny tried to focus, but with Cassie nestled close, her soft presence distracting him, his thoughts wandered. What the hell is wrong with you? Focus. There's a monster. Finally regaining his composure, Sunny fixed his attention on the Centurion. It marched slowly through the wasteland. The closer it came, the more details Sunny could see. Every scratch and mark on its armor, every twisted spike. But his eyes were drawn to something else. Between its sides, cradled carefully, was a gleaming crystal emitting a soft, radiant light. A transcendent soul shard, just like the ones they saw before, when two Centurions had retrieved similar shards from a massive dead creature. So they were collecting them all along. Sunny glanced at the barrow. The haunting tree atop the hill stood proud, its onyx branches and scarlet leaves like something sacred in a cursed world. He whispered the update to his companions. The creature moved closer, nearing the mound. Sunny held his breath. They were at the most dangerous point, right in its path. The monster passed them without pause. He exhaled, murmuring, "It's heading to the barrow." Nephi stayed tense. "Track it." Sunny nodded. His shadow slipped away, trailing the Centurion at a safe distance. Thanks to his extended control range, he could follow it all the way. The creature strode forward, holding the crystal as if it were something precious, almost reverent. Soon it reached the hill. Then it stopped. As if stopped by an invisible force, the monster hesitated. Then it bent low, gently placed the glowing shard on the sand, and backed away with lowered gaze. And then it knelt. Sunny blinked, stunned. Was he imagining it? No. The Centurion had lowered itself, folded its limbs, and laid its vicious weapons on the ground in a submissive posture. Nephi noticed Sunny's reaction and asked, "What is it?" He shook his head. "Just wait." That's when it happened. From beneath the twisted tree atop the barrow, a radiant glimmer appeared once more, stronger, brighter. The light rose from the shadows and drifted toward the Centurion and the crystal. As it neared, Sunny's eyes widened. A chill ran down his spine, and for a moment he forgot to breathe.